Mr. Kenneth was a man many people admired. In the city, his name opened doors. He was a billionaire businessman, the owner of companies that stretched across states. His mansion sat on the hills like a palace, with shining black gates, tall palm trees, and cars parked like trophies. He had everything: wealth, power, and fame. But what made Kenneth happiest was not the cars or the money. It was his family. His wife, Faith, was the kind of woman every man prayed for. She was not only beautiful, with her soft brown eyes and gentle smile, but she was also kind and respectful. She spoke softly and never raised her voice. She came from a humble home, and when Kenneth met her many years ago, she was working in a small shop to support her sick mother. He remembered how she would visit him when he had nothing, bringing him food in small coolers. She would sit by his side when his business failed, telling him, "We will rise again." Kenneth always told people, "If you remove everything I own, and leave only Faith and my children, I am still the richest man." They had 2 children: Gift, a sweet girl with her mother's calm spirit, and David, a curious little boy who loved to draw. Their home was full of laughter, bedtime stories, and evening prayers. Kenneth loved them deeply, but not everyone was happy for him. Kenneth's family, his mother, his younger brother Dennis, and his only sister Clara, had a different heart. To outsiders, they looked like a loving family. His mother would visit and hug Faith tightly. Dennis would greet her with smiles, and Clara would even bring gifts for the children. But Kenneth was not a fool. He saw through the fake smiles. They never liked Faith. From the very first day he introduced her to them, they complained. "She's too quiet," his sister had said. "She looks like she just wants to grab your money," his mother whispered once. Even after the wedding, they continued to speak against her. Kenneth knew they only pretended to be nice so they could keep enjoying his wealth. He had built a house for his mother in the village, started a business for Dennis, and sponsored Clara's education abroad. But instead of showing gratitude, they believed everything he owned also belonged to them. They would often ask for more money, land, cars, and if he delayed even for a day, they would call him selfish. Kenneth began to feel a heavy pain in his heart, not because they hated his wife, but because they never truly loved him either. All they wanted was his wealth. One night, as he sat quietly in his study, his thoughts kept troubling him. "What if I die today?" he asked himself. "Will Faith be safe? Will my children be treated like mine or like strangers?" He needed answers, and he was ready to do something he had never done before. A plan was beginning to form in his mind, something bold, dangerous, and unforgettable. The night was quiet, yet Kenneth's mind was loud. He sat alone in his private study, lights dimmed, with the sound of the wall clock ticking in the background. His hands were folded across his chest, and his eyes stared blankly at the bookshelf in front of him. He was not reading. He was not thinking of business. He was thinking of his family, not his wife and children, but the people who shared his blood, his mother, his brother, his sister, people he had loved and trusted all his life, people he had sacrificed for, time and again. And yet, they did not love his wife. They did not love his children. They only loved his money. Kenneth remembered how they used to speak about Faith when she wasn't listening. "I still believe she came into this family to eat," Clara once said. "Her children look like her." "Weak," Dennis had whispered. Even his own mother, the woman who gave birth to him, once told him coldly, "Kenneth, you were better before you married that girl." That night, the words cut deep. He tried to ignore it, tried to forgive, tried to hope they would change. But people who pretend can only pretend for a while. Time reveals everything. Kenneth had seen enough. Now, he wanted to see the full truth. He picked up his phone and dialed the number of his closest friend, Frank, the only person who had stood by him through his early days. "Frank, I need to see you," Kenneth said. The next morning, Frank arrived. They sat in the back garden, under the shade of the mango tree. Birds chirped above, but their conversation was heavy. "I want to fake my death," Kenneth said slowly. Frank's eyes widened. "Are you all right? Why would you say something like that?" Kenneth looked into his friend's face. I'm not mad. I'm serious. I've given my life to people who smile with me, but hate the ones I love. I want to know what happens if I'm not here. I want to see how they will treat Faith and the children. Will they protect them? Or will they throw them away and fight for my properties? Frank went silent for a while. Then he nodded. You want to test them? Kenneth nodded. Exactly. It took 2 hours for the plan to take shape. They would say Kenneth was going on a business trip abroad, and after some days, news would spread that he had died in a plane crash. No body, just ashes and sadness. Only Faith and Frank would know the truth. Later that evening, Kenneth sat his wife down in their bedroom. The children were already asleep. He told her everything. At first, Faith thought it was a joke. Then she started crying. You want to leave me and the children? Even if it's pretend, it will still be real for us. How do I tell our children their father is dead? Kenneth took her hands gently. I know it's hard, but this is the only way. I want to protect you. I want to see who truly cares. Please. Faith, be strong for me. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she nodded slowly. I trust you, she said, in a quiet voice. And so, the secret plan began. 2 days later, Mr. Kenneth traveled. He hugged his children and kissed his wife. Gift smiled and said, Daddy, bring me something sweet. David waved happily and added, and bring me a drawing book. Kenneth smiled, trying to keep his heart calm. He did not want them to see the storm brewing inside him. As he entered the car that would take him to the airport, he looked back one last time. His wife stood at the balcony, holding their children close. Her eyes met his, filled with silent strength and silent pain. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. 3 days later, the city woke up to shocking news. A private jet had gone down in the mountains during a business trip abroad. Among the list of passengers, Mr. Kenneth the billionaire. The news spread like fire. Television stations repeated it every hour. Newspapers carried his face on their front pages. Online, blogs wrote stories of his rise from a poor young man to a city giant. Some cried, others whispered, but none were more shaken than his family. His mother collapsed when she heard it. His brother Dennis screamed and broke his glass table. His sister Clara held her phone with shaking hands as she called people to break the news. They all cried loudly, as though their hearts were broken, but when no one was watching, their faces changed. Behind the curtains of the family house, laughter replaced tears. He's finally gone, Clara whispered to Dennis. Dennis chuckled. Now, we will see who owns what. Their mother, Mama Edith, wiped her face and said quietly, we must act fast. We will take everything, the house, the companies, the cars. That woman must leave. And so they began. They arrived at Kenneth's mansion wearing black, pretending to grieve. Faith welcomed them with red eyes and a broken heart. She looked pale from crying. The children sat in silence, too young to understand the weight of what was happening. Clara hugged her and whispered, we're here for you, dear. Dennis brought flowers and said, you are not alone. Mama Edith held her grandchildren and sighed deeply. They are our blood. We will never forget them. But it was all a lie. 2 nights later, Faith overheard them speaking in low tones behind the house. She must pack out. Dennis said, we'll change the documents. Everything belongs to us now, Clara added. Mama Edith's voice came sharp. If she refuses, we'll drag her to court. That house is not hers. Faith froze. Her hands trembled as she held her chest. The same people who came into her home and ate her food were now plotting to destroy her. She ran back into the room, shut the door, and cried. But she remembered Kenneth's words, be strong for me. So she wiped her tears. She knew this was only the beginning. What she didn't know was that Kenneth was watching everything from a quiet place, far away, waiting for the perfect moment to return. Days passed. Kenneth's mansion, once filled with joy and laughter, now felt like a shadow. The rooms echoed with silence. The furniture stood still, untouched. Even the flowers in the vases had started to dry. Faith wore black every day, not because she was pretending, but because her heart truly mourned. She missed her husband deeply, not because of the wealth or the name, but because he was her best friend, her peace, and her strength. Every night, she held her children close, telling them stories of their father. Gift cried often. David asked many questions. Is Daddy really gone? Faith would hug him tightly. He is with us in our hearts. But while she tried to keep the children calm, the storm outside was growing stronger. Kenneth's family had changed completely. They no longer knocked before entering the house. They walked in and out like they owned everything. Dennis began giving orders to the security guards. Clara moved into one of the guest rooms and brought her friends for sleepovers. Mama Edith, their mother, became the loudest voice. This house is for Kenneth's blood, she said one morning. Faith was just a wife. Now she is a widow. She has no say. They started calling meetings without Faith. One morning, she walked into the sitting room and found them discussing how to share Kenneth's properties. This house will be in Dennis' name, Clara said. I'll take the company shares, Dennis replied, and I'll move the children to my place, Mama Edith added. They are still young. They don't need their mother's influence. Faith stood frozen by the door. Excuse me, she said, her voice shaking. Did I hear you say you want to take my children? Mama Edith turned to her coldly. They are our grandchildren. We will take care of them. Clara stood and pointed. You've enjoyed this wealth enough. Now, step aside. Tears gathered in Faith's eyes, but she refused to cry in front of them. She turned and walked away without a word. But once inside her bedroom, she fell to the floor and wept. How could people pretend for so long? How could a mother, a brother, a sister turn so quickly? Still, she remembered Kenneth's voice. Hold on. Trust me. Just for a little while. So she stood up and wiped her face. Meanwhile, far away, Kenneth was watching everything. Frank had set up a secret apartment for him in a quiet area. Each day, Kenneth received updates from the workers who still respected him, from neighbors, and from hidden cameras inside the mansion. He watched as his family tried to strip Faith of everything. He saw her pain, he saw her strength, and he burned with quiet fire. They think I'm dead, he told Frank. Let them finish their game. When I return, they will see the man I truly am. It had been 3 weeks since Kenneth's death. To the world, he was gone. But to Faith, every night still felt like he was just away on a long journey. She kept the bedroom neat, his clothes untouched in the wardrobe, and his slippers still by the bed. Sometimes, she would sit on the edge of the mattress and whisper, I hope you're watching. She was doing her best to stay strong, but it wasn't easy. Kenneth's family had grown more wicked. The fake kindness they once showed was now gone completely. They spoke with boldness, walked around the house with pride, and treated Faith like a stranger in her own home. One morning, Faith came downstairs to find that they had started removing furniture from the house. The dining table was gone. The TV in the sitting room was gone. Even the car keys were missing from the drawer. When she asked Dennis what was happening, he didn't even look at her. He simply said, We're dividing the property. You have no say. You're not even legally married in the way that counts to us. Faith blinked. What do you mean? Clara laughed from the corner. We've spoken to our lawyer. That marriage certificate won't help you when the documents are all in Kenneth's name. And now that he's dead, we have the final say. Faith stood quietly. Her hands were shaking, but her face showed no tears. Then Dennis stepped forward and said the one thing that broke her. You and those children better leave this house before the week ends. We have no space for parasites. That night, Faith could not sleep. She stared at her children as they lay beside her, innocent, unaware of what was coming. She thought of all the times she cooked for Kenneth's family, all the times she treated them with love, and now, they wanted to throw her out like she was nothing. She turned her face to the ceiling and whispered, Kenneth, how much longer? Far away, Kenneth was also awake. He had received another video recording from one of his loyal staff who still worked at the house. The footage showed Dennis shouting at Faith. It showed Clara laughing. It showed their mother talking to a lawyer on the phone, arranging to change the documents. Kenneth's heart broke. This is enough, he told Frank. Frank looked at him. Are you sure you want to end it now? Kenneth nodded, his eyes cold. They've shown their hearts. Every mask has dropped. It's time to return. Frank picked up the phone and made some calls. The next morning, Kenneth's lawyer and the family driver, two men who were still loyal to him, were informed of the next step. Kenneth was coming home, not as the man they once knew, but as the man who knew the truth. The morning sun rose slowly over the city, casting golden light across rooftops and trees. But inside Kenneth's mansion, the air was filled with confusion and movement. Mama Edith was giving orders to the housemaids, telling them to pack Kenneth's clothes. "We'll take these to the village," she said. "They don't belong to this woman anymore." Clara was busy going through some papers, trying to forge new names on the property documents. Dennis was calling agents to value Kenneth's cars, already planning to sell them. Faith stood quietly by the stairs, watching them all. She had no more words to say. She had begged. She had tried to explain. She had endured. But now, she was simply waiting for the promise Kenneth made her. Hold on. Just for a little while. By noon, something strange happened. A black SUV drove into the compound. No one recognized the car at first. It wasn't one of Kenneth's known vehicles. The guards at the gate had been told not to stop anyone important, and the driver said only 4 words: "I'm here with justice." Out stepped a tall, firm man in a black suit. It was Kenneth. Alive, standing, breathing. For a moment, the world stood still. The guards gasped. One of the maids dropped the broom in her hand. Clara, who was on a phone call, froze with her mouth open. Dennis, who had just come out with some documents, nearly dropped them in shock. Faith was upstairs. She heard the noise and rushed down the stairs and stopped midway. There he was, her husband, her rock, the man they all said was dead. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Kenneth?" He looked up at her. "I told you I would return." Tears rushed to her eyes. She flew into his arms, and for the first time in weeks, she cried without shame. He held her tightly and whispered, "You've done well, my queen. You stood firm." Mama Edith stepped out of the hallway and screamed, "It's a ghost." "Jesus!" Dennis took 3 steps back. "It's not possible. We saw the news." Clara nearly fainted. "But you were declared dead." Kenneth pulled away from his wife and faced them calmly. "You wanted me dead, so I gave you the chance to show your true colors. And you didn't fail." He brought out a small voice recorder and pressed play. Their voices filled the air. Dennis planning to sell the house. Clara talking about how to push Faith out. Mama Edith calling her grandchildren half-bloods. Everyone went silent. Faith stood beside him, strong. The children ran out from their room and hugged their father. Kenneth bent to hold them, tears filling his eyes. "Your enemies are not always strangers," he said quietly, looking up at his family. "Sometimes, they live in your house." No one spoke, but the silence screamed louder than words. Kenneth stood tall in the middle of the living room. Behind him was Faith, strong like a pillar. In front of him stood the people who once called themselves his family: Mama Edith, Dennis, and Clara, now pale, trembling, and exposed. The room was quiet. Only the sound of the children playing in the hallway reminded anyone that this house had once been filled with joy. Kenneth looked at them, one after the other. "I gave you everything," he began. "A house for you, Mama. A job for you, Dennis. Education abroad for you, Clara. I did it not because I was forced, but because I loved you." His voice was calm, but firm. Each word carried weight. "I never asked for much in return, only that you love my wife and respect my children. But instead, you treated them like outsiders. You plotted to throw them into the street, and you did it all with smiling faces." Clara stepped forward suddenly. "We're sorry, Kenneth. We didn't know." "Don't lie," he said sharply. "You knew. You've always known. The truth is, you never believed Faith deserved this life. You never wanted her here." Mama Edith finally found her voice. "She's not one of us, but she stood by me when none of you did." Kenneth shouted. "When I had nothing, she fed me with her last food. When I cried, she held me. When you all doubted me, she prayed for me. And you think I'll allow you to insult her under my roof?" Faith touched his arm gently. "It's okay," she whispered. But Kenneth shook his head. "No, my love. Let them hear it." He turned back to his mother. "Do you remember, Mama, when I was in the hospital? broke and weak, who brought me food, who washed my clothes, who begged the doctor to give me more time to pay. Mama Edith looked down, shamed. It wasn't you, Kenneth said. It was Faith. This woman. He faced Dennis. And do you remember who helped you start your first business? Dennis said nothing. I signed the first check. And now, you wanted to throw my wife out, with my children? You called them parasites? You, a man who can't even feed himself without my help? The air in the room grew heavy. Clara wiped her face. We were wrong, Kenneth nodded. Yes, you were. And now, there will be consequences. He brought out some documents from a folder Frank had handed him earlier. These are new ownership papers. From today, none of you have any legal access to my companies or properties. Everything has been transferred to Faith and the children. You will leave this house before sunset. Mama Edith began to weep. Kenneth, please, don't send us away. We'll not fight you. But I will no longer feed people who bite me with the same mouth they used to smile at me. Faith said nothing. She simply held Kenneth's hand tightly. That evening, the guards helped them pack. Shouting. No police, no noise, just silence and truth. The house felt different now. More false laughter. No more footsteps echoing with hidden envy. No more eyes watching Faith like she was an outsider. The air was calm, the silence warm. Kenneth sat on the balcony with his children. Gift sat on his lap, drawing on his hand with a pen. David was busy telling him about everything he had missed. We finished the big puzzle, Daddy, and Mommy made sweet pancakes. He smiled as he listened, his heart full. Faith stood at the doorway, watching them with soft eyes. It was over. The test had been long and painful, but it had exposed the truth. That evening, Kenneth gathered the family staff, those who had stood by Faith while he was dead. He thanked them one by one. Some had refused to hand over car keys to Dennis. Others had secretly reported every wicked plan to Frank. He rewarded them generously. Then he called a small family meeting. Only himself, Faith, Gift, and David. They sat in the living room, holding hands. I want you all to know something, Kenneth said gently. This house, this wealth, everything I own, it's not my crown. You three are. Faith lowered her head, tears falling quietly, not from sadness, but from deep, quiet joy. You carried a heavy burden, Kenneth said, facing her. You were insulted, betrayed, treated like nothing. But you stood. You didn't run. You didn't curse. You held this family with grace. She nodded slowly. Because I believed you'd come back. And because I love you. Kenneth reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. This is the key to the new estate I built last year. I was keeping it for a surprise, but now, it belongs to you and the children. Everything inside it is in your name. Faith looked at him, stunned. But Kenneth, he smiled. No more secrets, no more tests. You've passed everyone. I trust you with everything. He then turned to the children. My angels, he said softly. Never forget what your mother did for you. She fought battles with her silence. She stood strong when I was gone. She is not just your mother, she is your hero. Gift leaned in and hugged Faith tightly. I love you, Mommy. David followed. You're my best friend, Mommy. Faith held them both, her heart full, her hands trembling. That night, for the first time in many weeks, the family ate dinner together in peace. No whispers, no fake smiles, just truth, laughter, and love. Outside, the stars shone quietly. Inside, the storm had passed. And in the heart of it all was a man who had everything, not because of the money or the mansion, but because he had found what so many people die searching for. A woman who loved him, children who adored him, and a home built on truth. Hello, champion. I hope you enjoy our stories. Please hit the like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks.